to this presentation. In this video, I'm going to speak about orbital perturbations. The Kepler orbit is ideal in the sense that it assumes that the Earth is a uniform spherical mass and that the only force acting is the centrifugal force resulting from the satellite motion balancing the gravitational pull of the Earth. But in practice, other forces which can be significant are the gravitational forces of the Sun and the Moon and atmospheric drag. The gravitational pulls of Sun and Moon have negligible effect on low orbiting satellites, but they do affect the satellites in the geostationary orbit. Atmospheric drag, on the other hand, has negligible effect on geostationary satellites, but does affect the orbiting Earth, low orbiting Earth satellites below 10,000 kilometers. Now let us see the effects of non-spherical Earth. For non-spherical Earth of uniform mass, according to Kepler's third law, the nominal mean motion n0 is given by n0 is equal to square root of mu by a cube. So this zero subscript is included as a reminder that this result applies for a perfectly spherical Earth of uniform mass. However, it is known that the Earth is not perfectly spherical, there being an equatorial bulge and flattening at the poles and a shape described as oblate's period. When the Earth's oblateness is taken into account, the mean motion, denoted in this case by the symbol n, is modified to n is equal to n0 into 1 plus k1 into 1 minus 1.5 sin squared I divided by a squared into 1 minus e squared whole power 1.5. Right. So here k1 is a constant which evaluates to 66,063.1704 kilometers squared. The Earth's oblateness has negligible effect on the semi-major axis A, and if A is known, the mean motion is readily calculated. The orbital period taking into account the Earth's oblateness is termed as anomalistic period, and the mean motion specified in the NASA bulletins is the reciprocal of the anomalistic period. So the anomalistic period is given by PA is equal to 2 pi by n seconds, where n is in radians per second. Okay, if the known quality is n, then we can solve for A, keeping in mind that n0 is also a function of A. So this equation can be solved for A by finding the root of this equation, that is n minus square root of mu by a cube into 1 plus k1 into 1 minus 1.5 sin squared I divided by a squared into 1 minus e squared whole power 1.5 is equal to 0. And now the oblateness of the Earth also produces two rotations of the orbital plane. One is the regression of the nodes and the second one is the rotation of upsides in the orbital plane. Now let us see about the oblateness of regression of the nodes. Regression of the nodes is where the nodes appear to slide along the equator. In effect, the line of nodes which is in the equatorial plane rotates about the center of the Earth. Thus, omega, which is the right ascension of ascending node, shifts its position. So, if the orbit is prograde, the nodes slide for westward, and if retrograde, they slide for eastward. A satellite in the prograde orbit moves eastward, and in retrograde orbit it is in westward. So in the nodes therefore move in a direction opposite to the direction of the satellite motion, hence the term regression of the nodes. For a polar orbit that is I is equal to 90 degree, the regression is 0. The second effect is the rotation of upsides in the orbital plane, and both effects depends upon the mean motion n and the semi-major axis A and eccentricity E. And these factors can be grouped into one factor k given by k is equal to n into k1 divided by a squared into 1 minus e squared the whole square. k will have the same unit as n. Thus, n will be in radians per day and k will be in radians per day. And with the n in degrees per day, k will be in degrees per day. So, an approximate expression for the rate of change of omega with respect to time is given by d omega by dt is equal to minus k into cos I, where I is the inclination. When the rate of change given by this above equation, the regression is for westward, and when the rate is positive, the regression is eastward. So it will be seen that therefore that for eastward regression I must be greater than 90 or the orbit must be retrograde. It is possible to choose the values of A, E and I such that the rate of rotation is 0.9856 degree per day eastward. Such an orbit is said to be sun synchronous, and the major effect produced by the equatorial bulge is rotation of the line of upsides. So the line of upsides will also rotate due to this equatorial bulge. This line rotates in the orbital plane, resulting in the argument of perigee changing with time. The rate of change is given by d omega by dt is equal to 2 minus 2.5 into sine squared I. So again, the units for the rate of rotation of the line of upsides will be the same as those for n incorporated in k. Okay. So when the inclination I is equal to 63.435, the term within the parenthesis is equal to 0, and hence no rotation takes place. Use is made of this fact and the orbit chosen for the Russian Molniya satellites. Denoting the epoch time by t naught, the right ascension of ascending node by omega naught and the argument of perigee by omega naught at epoch gives the new values of omega and omega at time t as omega is equal to omega naught into d omega by dt into t minus t naught, whereas this angular omega is given by angular omega naught plus d omega by dt into t minus t naught. Keep in mind that the orbit is not a physical entity and it is the forces resulting from an oblate earth which acts on the satellite to produce the changes in the orbital parameters. Thus, rather than follow a closed elliptical path in a fixed plane, the satellite drifts as a result of the regression of nodes, and the latitude of the point of closest approach changes as a result of the rotation of the line of upsides. With this in mind, it is permissible to visualize the satellite as following a closed elliptical orbit, but with the orbit itself moving relative to the earth as a result of the changes in omega and angular omega. So the period PA is the time required to go around the orbital path from the perigee to perigee, even though the perigee has moved relative to the earth. Suppose, for example, that the inclination is 90 degrees, so that the regression of the nodes is 0, and the rate of rotation of line of upsides will be minus k by 2. And further, imagine the situation where the perigee at the start of the observations is exactly over the ascending node. One period later, the perigee would be at an angle of minus k into Pa by 2 relative to the ascending node, or in other words, would be south of the equator. The time between crossings at the ascending node would be Pa into 1 plus k by 2n, which would be the period observed from the earth. You can recall that k will have the same units as n, for example radians per second. So in addition to the equatorial bulge, the earth is not perfectly circular in the equatorial plane. It has the small eccentricity of the order of 10 power minus 5, and this is referred to as the equatorial ellipticity. The effect of the equatorial ellipticity is set up by a gravitic gradient, and which has a pronounced effect on the satellites in geostationary orbits. A satellite in geostationary orbit ideally should remain fixed relative to the Earth. The gravity gradient resulting from the equatorial ellipticity causes these satellites in geostationary orbit to drift to one of two stable points which coincide with the minor axis of the equatorial ellipse. These 2 points are separated by 180 degree on the equator and are approximately 75 degree E longitude and 105 degree west longitude. And satellites in service are prevented from drifting to these points through station keeping maneuvers, because old out of service satellites eventually do drift to these points and they are referred as satellite graveyards. And you can note that the effect of equatorial ellipticity is negligible on most other satellite orbits. It is effective only on geostationary orbits. And now let us discuss about the atmospheric drag. For near Earth satellites below about 1000 kilometers, the effects of the atmospheric drag are significant because the drag is greatest at the perigee and the drag acts to reduce the velocity at this point, with the result that the satellite doesn't reach the same apogee height on successive revolutions. The result is that the semi-major axis and the eccentricity are both reduced. Drag doesn't noticeably change the other orbital parameters including perigee height. So in the program used for generating the orbital elements given in the NASA bulletins, a pseudo drag term is generated which is equal to 1/2 the rate of change of mean motion. And I can write an approximate expression for the change of major axis as A is equal to A0 into N0 divided by N0 plus N0 dash into T minus T0 whole power 2 by 3. Where the zero subscripts denote values at reference time T0 and N0 dash is the first derivative of the mean motion. The mean anomaly is also changed, an approximate value for the change being delta M is equal to N0 dash by 2 into T minus T0 the whole square. So this is the first time derivative of the mean motion just listed in the NASA bulletin. For example, this value will be 0.000307 revolutions per day square. Thus, the changes resulting from the drag term will be significant only for long time intervals, and for present purposes we can ignore it. Okay. And let us now discuss about the inclined orbits. A general situation of a satellite in an inclined elliptical orbit is complicated by the fact that the different parameters relate to different reference frames. The orbital elements are known as the reference to the plane of the orbit, the position of which is fixed in space, while the location of the Earth station is usually given in the terms of local geographical coordinates which rotate with the Earth. Rectangular coordinate systems are generally used in calculations of satellite position and velocity in space, while the Earth station quantities of interest may be azimuth and elevation angle and range. So transformation between coordinate systems and therefore required. And the determination of look angles and range involves some quantities and concepts, and the first one is the orbital elements which are published by NASA bulletins and various measures of time, the perifocal coordinate system which is based on the orbital plane, the geocentric equatorial coordinate system which is based on the Earth's equatorial plane, and the topocentric horizon coordinate system which is based on observer's horizon plane. And we have to consider the major coordinate transformations needed. One is the satellite position measured as the perifocal system is transformed to the geocentric horizon system, in which the Earth rotation is measured, and thus enabling the satellite position and the Earth station location to be coordinated. The satellite to Earth station position vector is transformed to the topocentric horizon system, which enables the look angles and the range to be calculated. Thank you.